Thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. This is so exciting. Some of you we got to see yesterday. I see some of those faces back again today, and so many more. It's so fantastic to see you on screen and to be with you, although I do wish we were all had been able to be in San Diego having these conversations. That would have been fun, but maybe this way we get more people to participate, which is also great. In fact, two of our speakers today would not have been in San Diego, so we have a really full, robust agenda for you today, and I hope it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting and very relevant to your work. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. This is we are offering this as an AIA. For an AIA learning unit as an elective course, and NCARB is a registered provider. This, for those of you who stick with us for the whole event, this is, you will get 1.25 learning units awarded if you're an AIA member. And in this session today, we hope to you'll be able to explain the conclusion of the ACSA and NCARB research, which shows the shortfalls in professional practice education. You'll have a chance to observe some example course units presented by our NCARB scholars and think about how to teach pro-practice topics, understand how to use robust learning objectives, which I do not promise that these four are, but we'll talk a little bit about what robust learning objectives look like, and engage in discussion with your peers at the end of the session about the needs and opportunities for improving professional practice education. At this point, I suspect everyone is a Zoom expert, but just in case, you do have your participant list at the bottom that you can, if you pop down to the bottom toolbar, that should pop up for you. You can see who's there. You can use it to raise your hand if you have a question, although we'll really do most of our Q&A at the end in the last 25 minutes of the session. And then there is also the chat box where you can put in comments or questions. Some of you may have mixed opinions about using the chat box because you probably have spent the last 4 weeks telling your students not to chat and have side conversations. So, but I'll leave that up to you to self-police. So our agenda today, I think, is going to be fast moving and energetic. I've been to 2 other webinars at completely different settings today, and one of them was not fast moving. So I'm promise that we're going to keep it interesting and lively here for you today. This one is going to focus first on the why. Some of you have probably heard some of this information from us before, but we're just going to do a quick review of why ACSA and NCARB really want to support professional practice education. We'll talk about the Scholars Program itself, our sort of flagship product for you all, and some highlights and lessons learned from our scholars community, and then of course that discussion piece with you all. So I'm going to now pass it off to Harry Falconer. Many of you know Harry. He is NCARB's Vice President for Experience and Education. And Harry is going to share with us sort of a little about the why.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It is really great to see all of you today, although I'm only looking at 4 or 5 of you at a time, but I know you're all there. As Jeremy already said, I'm really sorry we couldn't all be together in San Diego, but times are as they are, and we're looking forward to the time that we are back together. I think we're very excited to have the opportunity, and again, we thank ACSA for making sure that we can still present this session to you in this format today. And I really do appreciate all of you being here on a Friday, what is for us on the East Coast an afternoon. So if you want to make it a happy hour while you're watching, be sure to make it a happy hour at the same time. So Jeremy has me talking a little bit about the why. So just a quick overview. Around 6 years ago, actually, Jeremy, you want to back up for a second? I'll tell you when to change the slides. Around 6 years ago, pro-practice professors attending our Licensing Advisors Summit asked if they could stick around and use the space to meet together. And so, of course, we said yes. The event was such an interactive and engaging group where we actually began to hear issues that all of you face on a regular basis in teaching professional practice. So the following year, we actually formalized the gathering of pro-practice professors and by adding it to our program of offerings. So pro-practice is pretty important in NCARB, as you can probably imagine. Professional practice, as you know, the reason for a license is, of course, to practice architecture. So we all hear statements about pro practice, the academy and the academy in general. We hear the academy doesn't teach practice. Graduates come out knowing nothing. So we don't necessarily believe that at NCARB. You might think we do, but we don't. And one thing that we do have is a great respect for what each of you does on a daily basis in teaching professional practice. So we decided to really engage and find out some facts. We decided to engage with ACSA to make this happen. As many of you know, I'm at many ACSA events on behalf of NCARB. So we really wanted to find out what was happening. So we wanted to figure out who teaches professional practice, because we hear rumors about that. What's actually taught in professional practice? We keep hearing there needs to be more, but what's actually taught? And we'll get to what even needs to be taught. But also we wanted to know what graduates of architecture programs and even architects after they've been out practicing for a while actually think, or what they think they recall about their professional practice academic experience. So we worked at ACSA to collect data through surveys. So let's now look at some slides here for a minute. So that first slide there. So one of the questions has always been who actually teaches professional practice. The rumor has been that it's just adjuncts, people who teach 1 or 2 hours a month. So we did some, and questions were, they don't really practice. They just sort of come in and teach for an hour or 2 every now and then. So we did our research, and the research actually does tell us that the average years of teaching are 9. The average years of practice for most of you that are teaching professional practice is 25 years. We specifically asked how many were currently licensed. So of course, 84% of you all came back in that report and said you were licensed. And of course, 70% even came back and said they were currently practicing in varying size of practices. One of the other questions we've always been subject to, or statements actually, has been that you aren't full-time faculty, but you're really not teaching that. Again, you just come in and teach as adjuncts. So what the survey data did come back and tell us was that 52% of you actually also teach design studio. And I think the survey came back even higher, somewhere in the 70% range of you all are full-time faculty at the universities. So next. Then we asked in that original survey, what is actually taught in professional practice? What are the courses and what are we looking at? So you see here on your left of the screen, the areas ranked from most emphasized to least, which areas were most emphasized in your courses. And you'll see in bold, practice management, project development, and then documentation. You'll see those in there. Those are the actual 6 practice areas that we identify in AXP and also in our ARE. But you'll see in those first highest ranked, most emphasized, professional conduct, practice management, legal responsibilities, and stakeholder roles. So things we know do continue to happen after they leave the course classroom. And yes, that's really good to see there from me to just put up a quick chat box there, is the fact that 99% of the courses actually cover ethical issues. And it is the most frequently cited topic, which is actually very important. And 57% of those courses also covered equitable work practices. Next slide. So how is professional practice really taught? Is there any connections? We're asking about connections. Quick anecdotally, we've run into a lot of people, particularly the non-architects, non-architecture educated staff that we have at the council. We're completely shocked to see that professional practice is only taught for 3 hours. So 1 3-hour course, maybe 2 3-hour courses. So there's a concept that professional practice courses were taught throughout. Our entire 5-year degree programs are 3 years. So we wanted to ask you all in the initial survey, was there any connection between the professional practice course and actual design studio? Is it filtering through the studios yet? We were happy to receive that, to hear the report that 37% of you actually do try and integrate that into your design studios. And this was done 2 years ago, and even more so, maybe anecdotally, not through surveys, we've heard about many more of you now integrating the pro-practice information and those courseworks into your design studios. We were also curious at that point 2 years ago, the connection between professional practice and internship or practicums. Only 28% at that point did, but we're also learning it grows a little bit more, particularly in those schools who offer an IPEL option. Again, we're hearing more and more opportunities of how this can actually be integrated as the past couple years have passed. Next. So we also wanted to ask what was the most memorable moment. So this is really in the second phase where we're asking professionals, both graduates and also people who are in practice today. What was the most memorable about the professional practice coursework that these individuals completed? So this was actually the profession, not to the faculty. So interestingly enough, the largest piece was the professor. So 29% of the respondents said their most memorable part was the professor. So that means y'all are doing a really good job making sure people remember you. I think that's important, which also makes us remember a good time and something memorable in the courses. 28% of those surveyed came back and said it was the course content. It can be a little bit concerning, but it's sort of okay. And then of course, 27% tell us it's not memorable at all. So these are part of the reasons why we're saying, hey, we really do need to elevate this. We need people to remember pro practice, and we need people to remember the content that's given to them in those courses. So next up, we asked them, to the professionals, we asked, do you feel the professional practice course prepared you to understand the necessary, this understanding, one second. Do you feel that the professional practice course prepared you with the understanding to enter the profession at the time it was taken? 32% actually said yes, and 29% were neutral. So again, keeping in mind maybe how long the individuals who were answering the survey had been out of, had graduated, how long ago they had graduated, information like that. So that wasn't really bad, in our opinion, but again, could be increased. And then we asked firm leaders, in their opinion, how instrumental is the current professional practice coursework in preparing graduates for AXP and ARE? So that was a question we really wanted to know from NCARB standpoint relative to our programs. We came back, only 17% said it was instrumental, and I will say only 17%. 29% said, you know, it's fairly instrumental. So fairly instrumental to instrumental, if you add that up, is a good portion of them. And 35% said only slightly. So again, a reason why we need to focus a little bit more and want to work with you all to focus more on professional practice. Next one. And another question which we asked firm leaders to find out again how it was working, what they were getting when they hired individuals. So we asked firm leaders again, which of the following topics do recent graduates continue to develop during AXP and ARE preparation? And I don't think there's any surprise to see that the top four were codes and regulations, building materials and assemblies, building envelope systems, and technical documentation. And you know, there's an understanding level taught through the academic education. And we know, I think, from our own experiences that in fact you do continue to hone in on those competencies and really helps you, you have to sort of work at these things and actually get your fingers dirty, I should say, in understanding these and working in these to actually make it more beneficial. And that's one of the reasons why we do have the AXP. So you get that next level of competency development as you move towards licensure. Then we had to ask this question, because again, a lot of what we're talking about these days is about competency. It's a whole different topic we can talk about. I don't want to side rail this conversation, introduction on competency, but we did ask at the end of the professional practice course, what is the target level of competency for students? And the important part here, I think, is to see the differences, okay? So full-time practitioners believe that at the end of a professional practice course, the target level of competency should be 52% said fundamental awareness, which to me, I think was a pretty good thing in a way of saying, we know we need to do more, we know we need to teach more. They need to have a fundamental awareness when they come into our offices. Now we asked recent graduates who are the new professionals with 0 to 2 years of experience. They felt their professional practice course prepared them mostly at the novice level. I'm not sure what color it is. It's sort of a grayish blue one on my screen. But 30% of those new professionals actually said they felt it prepared them to be at an intermediate level of experience, of competency. And the professional practice faculty, of course, said that they thought that they were teaching, and the course should prepare them to be at an intermediate level when they complete the coursework. So you can see some differences there. They're not critical, but I think this sort of sets the stage for where we know that there can be better work that we can do together, and where we're trying to go in the future. Next up. So one of the questions, of course, from everybody today, we can talk about later, of course, is how is your professional practice course delivered today? And then, really, what's the future of professional practice look for? So this data truly supported our interest in elevating the work that you all do. It truly raised the awareness of our member board members and our architect licensing boards. Mike Monty and I have presented these findings over the last 2 annual business meetings we had, and it really did raise a lot of conversation and really brought some interest. What it has done is helped raise our commitment to provide resources and events to each of you to help you be great at your jobs, not just good at your jobs, but great at your jobs, teaching students about practice. We want to help, we want to be there. And so one of our most recent successes, and Jeremy has talked about this briefly already, has been the launch of our NCARB Scholars in Professional Practice program 2 years ago. And now Patricia is going to give us a brief overview of the program, and then you're going to have the pleasure of hearing from some of our graduates talking about what they do today. So Patricia.
Hi there. Thank you. So yes, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Ramallo. I'm the part of the Experience and Education team at INCARB. So I actually work with Jeremy and Harry. I am one of the people working towards developing the NCARB's Scholars in Professional Practice program that launched in 2018, August 2018. And I see several faces of the inaugural class here, so hi. And the whole purpose was to address current and future needs of academia and the profession. The goal was to develop strong academic leaders, like Harry was saying, in the professional practice community. Can you please move forward? Thank you. So every year, this program gathers educators from around the country to share best practices, learn from experts. We have faculty trainers, and most importantly, to learn from each other, because as we saw yesterday in the roundtable, virtual roundtable, there's a lot of information you already have or that you can learn from your peers. So that is one of the biggest values. So they get together to brainstorm ways to improve the delivery of professional practice courses. Unfortunately, as you may have already guessed or seen, this year's training was canceled due to ongoing COVID-19 concerns. We didn't want to get people from all around the country in one room. It didn't sound smart this year. So we are looking forward to our 2021 NCARB Scholars program at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So Greg, he's already here. Greg and his school have extended the invitation to go to Cal Poly next year. So that's where we're going to be. Hopefully in a warm and really nice environment that I just saw in one of the slides that we'll see soon. The program extends over 2.5 very intense days. You can ask the people who attended later, they are intense days. The overall program includes including the selection of the faculty, trainers, and the topics. It's actually done by a Scholars Advisory Work Group, also several of them in this call. And this work group is composed of past attendees, and also we have people who are actively working in the profession. We always try to have a recent grad or a student who has taken the class. So we have different perspectives giving shape to this program. And you can see in the screen some of the topics that we cover or we have covered in the past. It goes from teaching pedagogy and curriculum integration to negotiation skills. We talk about ethics. We have experts on legal professional responsibilities. And again, conversation, lots of conversation about the different topics. So beyond the program content, which it's selected by the scholars advisory work group. The value of the Scholars Program also lies in the development of interpersonal skills through face-to-face discussions, sharing of best practices, and the long-lasting connections that you can make while you're there. As I mentioned before, it is a very intense program. It starts early. I'm sure some people still have memories of the early breakfasts. And we go all the way to dinner. And we actually encourage the faculty trainers and everyone to participate in all activities and all meals, so we can extend that conversation to every single moment, from the break to the session to the dinner. Last year, we even included a tour, a city tour and a school tour, and we were still discussing professional practice topics throughout those events. Between, as you can see in the screen again, between 2018 and 2019, we have had 23 NCARB scholars, and we hope to be able to grow this number in the upcoming years. Every year, hope you do know this, INCARB has funding available to support your participation and attendance for a limited number of people. The scholarship recipients selected by the scholarship advisory, by the Scholars Advisory Work Group. The scholarship covers travel expenses and all your expenses related to this program. And the scholarship applications are usually announced in 2021. So the applications open in February of 2021, and they are selected by the advisory work group. You can also have the option to attend if you already have funding or want to apply or just find your way in your own, or your school supports it. You can register to attend, and the registration fee, it's $350. It covers all the sessions and the meals, including the dinners at night and all the conversation that comes along with that. So it is a great opportunity. So I hope after hearing a little bit more and hearing from our past attendees, you can, you have the opportunity to join us in California next year in San Luis Obispo.
Patricia, I will clarify one thing. Thank you for that. I'll clarify one thing. There seems to have been some confusion, and we've sort of been finding our feet a little bit in the selection process. So if you've been, not selected one year, it does not mean you might not be selected the following year. We actually try to balance out the experience level of the participants. So we have some with more seasoned experience and some who are brand new to teaching, but passionate about it. And so there's a little bit of voodoo that goes into, if you will, that goes into the selection process. So it's not that that you didn't measure up or something like that. It's just we were looking for a really great mix so the magic could happen. All right, thank you both. And Patricia, I think, did provide some answers in the chat for those of you who had questions about the NCARB, so the ACSA survey. And then additional information on that, I'm sure, is available on the ACSA website. I think that's where it lives. Maybe somebody can, Patricia or Mike, you can put the link to that in chat as well.
It lives in our professional practice online community.
Okay. So, we'll talk more about that later as well. So now, thank you all. I know some of you have heard the data before, and others of you have been at Scholars before. So now we're at the part that is fresh and new. So wake up, stretch if you need to, and can be ready to get excited as our panelists share their experiences. And let's make sure I've covered all my housekeeping things. I think I did. We want to begin. I want to have each of the panelists share with us, first of all, sort of their role at their school, how the program is structured at their school, and anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself. I have sort of your general bio up there on screen, but all fantastic educators and delightful people. So I'll maybe start with Catherine, if you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself and your program, and we'll just go down the list. And if you're talking, you're muted.
Hi, everybody. The first thing I need to do is transition to my slides.
Okay.
So if you'll bear with me for a moment, I will do that.
We opted, Mike gave us the option of pre-recording everything so it could be all tidy and edited together. And we said, no, we prefer messy realism. So I hope you all enjoy us being live and available.
Okay. Is that my phone? Apologies for that. I'm in full screen now.
You're good.
And this is coming through my computer.
I barely hear it, so just talk over it.
So this is the Burbank campus where I am based. I'm with Woodbury School of Architecture, and I'm the Director of Outreach. And so I also work with the San Diego campus. That's our second campus. I am the Career Advisor, IPAL Advisor, Licensing Advisor. I work with our AIAS organizations, other student organizations, with alumni, with firms, with AIA chapters, and organize our career fairs for the School of Architecture. And recently I've been involved in a year-long mentoring program with high school students from LAUSD and with alumni as mentors. We have about 400 students in our undergraduate and graduate programs in architecture and interior design. So I've co-taught the practice class in our MArch program for about 6 years. But what I'm going to talk about today is our sequence for the BArch program. But just by way of a little background, I'm going to point out that most of us, or 61% of schools, have 3 semester hours to teach all of this material, and that can be really challenging. And these are the old student performance criteria, but those are the ones I had when I taught the MArch program. And I found it very challenging to find the right activities to work with all of those, to address all of those effectively. When we did the Scholars Program, we also learned about working on learning objectives and the corresponding teaching strategies. And one thing Elizabeth Mahler was the leader of that part of the program. She pointed out to us that we often had too many learning objectives in our course. And so I think that made me reflect on that aspect too. So this is the sequence for our BArch program. We now have 3 courses. The first one is design development documentation. Then we have introduced a new course, which is on real estate development. And then the 5th year, we have the future practice, we're calling it now. And I've listed the new NAB criteria here, and it shows you, if we have 3 courses, of course, we can spread them over more time, but what it really does for us, I think, is allow us to align the assignments more effectively with our learning objectives. So this is the chart that we discussed at the Scholars Program, and probably many of you are familiar with this. But it was something for us to refer to as we examined our own courses and how we were, what teaching strategies would be most effective for what we're teaching. So here, I'm going to go into a little bit more of the first course. When students are producing a set of documents, they're learning by doing the drawings. They're able to analyze accessibility and egress and learn BIM and learn about the coordination aspects of BIM. But what I really found fascinating about this is that we could look at ethics that apply to this particular work that we were doing in this course and discuss the ethical and legal issues surrounding the documentation. And hopefully you can all read that there. And then here's an example of, they would take a course drawing a case study, which was an architecturally interesting project, and do detailing for it. This is just a couple of samples from my portfolio course. So the real estate development portion, this was really the key that was missing for me in the 3-unit course, which was having an actual site where we could look at zoning. You know, talking about zoning in the abstract is really impossible, or I guess it is possible, but it's a better learning experience for them to research an actual site that they're interested in. And then they can go further and develop a performa for developing the project, and cost estimating, which is another thing that was hard to fit in to the practice course. And there are activities that help reinforce that experience. And then there are ethical questions surrounding development. So this is a perfect opportunity to dive into some of those. And this is also an example of student work from our portfolio class, but I'm showing this just as an example of a project that students would take to develop their pro forma and their financial, the financing for developing a project. So the last part of the sequence is the future practice. And this is where it really dovetails with what I did for the MARC program, which is, well, studying relevant models of practice, but to develop an initiative or a business plan that aligned with individual goals and a broader purpose, and then to apply the business aspects of practice to your business plan or your initiative. And here you have the ethics that we often discuss associated with professional practice and in the AIA Code of Ethics. So I want to add, well, let me do this one more slide here, which is kind of where I come from. This is, I'm not teaching all of these courses, but I had the opportunity to work with the chairs from the San Diego campus, Jose Peral and Heather Flood from our Burbank campus, and our Dean, Ingela Walmus-Ritter, who has a vision that practice is an important part of our curriculum. And my role here is I actually do teach the portfolio discourse course, which in which students are working to present their work and also present the work to affirm what they would use to apply for a job. And we have a work experience requirement for all of our undergraduate students. It's really important that they put their work together. But I found that the portfolio discourse itself course was helpful in preparing them for practice. So this is how I sort of interact with all of these things that are happening. And I was really happy to have this opportunity to help develop the sequence, which is still going through our curriculum committee review. And with that, I will just conclude with a slide of some of our students and a link that hopefully you'll have a chance to take a look at some of our student work.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. With that, welcome everybody. My name is Greg Wynn. I teach at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Let me see if I can get these slides to pop up. And hopefully, go back here. Sorry about that. There we go.
Greg, while you're flipping that, I'll mention that the learning objectives piece was something that really resonated with last year's scholars. And even, I think a lot of people wish we had a lot more time to spend talking about learning objectives.
Yeah, learning objectives has been something that I know in my teaching has not always been top of the list, and now I've been able to be at both the inaugural scholars program and also was allowed to visit at the second scholars program. And learning outcomes and objectives was a huge part of both programs. I thought it was very helpful in helping organize the overall content of the course. And so again, I highly agree, and I applaud Catherine on the work that she's doing at Woodbury. It's really top notch. Let me tell you about my world. This is where I live, San Luis Obispo, California. It always looks like this every day. Okay, so I know you all want to come visit, but it's 70 and sunny every day. So I hope you can't see out the back window here because it's probably going to rain today. But this is the promo shot that Cal Poly gives us to share. And if you know the campus or you're kind of familiar, the architecture building is kind of right here in the bottom center. So this is where I get to work, and I'm extremely fortunate to be able to be here. Tell you a little bit about Cal Poly, the university itself, located in San Luis Obispo, California, Central Coast region. We're about 10 miles from the coast. It's a very popular school, competitive to get into. And I think partly it's just location. But it's a very good academic school. Strengths in engineering, architecture, and agriculture. We're actually the second largest landholder in the system. We have a lot of property for ag projects, and even back in the very back of this V-shaped canyon back in there, the center of the screen, we actually have some land that we call Poly Canyon that is used as an architecture experimental playground. We get to go back in there and build things on a site back there. So if you are in the scholars program, or if you ever come to visit, I'll be happy to give you a tour of our playground or our field experiment place back in the back. It's really quite spectacular. Within the college itself, the College of Architecture, we have about 1,800 students. About 40% of those are BArch students. So we are certainly the lion's share of the College of Architecture. It's a 5-year BArch program, NAB accredited, and we are, again, highly competitive. I think last year before data, we were accepting about 14% of our applicants, and we are turning away students that are highly qualified to get in. It's just kind of luck of the draw. It's very fast paced. We're on a quarter system, 10-week quarters times 3. We certainly believe in learn by doing. We have all the pieces to support this many students with workshops, outdoor areas to build. Of course, we all wish we had more, but it's actually quite a wonderful campus. It's my alma mater, and I'm just happy to be able to be here and teach. I also I teach the ProPrac course and I also teach 5th year design thesis and capstone. So I'm one of those full-time lecturers. If you looked at that slide that Harry had, I'm pretty much the average in terms of years taught, years in practice. I kind of represent I guess I'm a C student. I'm average. Okay. Within the flow chart of the curriculum, the BArch program, like many schools, and this is one of the things that's always frustrated me, is that the ProPrac portion is taught way late in the curricula, and as I ask students, or a common theme that I hear back from students is, we wish we had known this information earlier. It would have helped us so much more. And with all the other things that we're all being asked to teach, it just kind of gets slammed to the end. And as Catherine has mentioned, it's packed full of objectives from NAB as to how we're going to fill all of these requirements. So I'm certainly advocating at my university and on the curricular committees to begin to spread some of this load out in earlier years. And we're moving in that direction. We're getting some of that data and that information down into the earlier years, very little in second, more in 3rd year, 4th year, a little, not as much, and then it's very heavy in 5th year still, but we are trying to push some of this information downstream, a little upstream, whichever direction we go, a little bit to take some of the load off this ProPrac course. But this is about where we are. In my, the way I teach this, or in my studio setting for ProPrac looks like this, about 110 students in a 4-hour per week session, 2-hour sessions. If you think about that over a 10-week quarter, I'm really getting these students for 40 hours. In my mind, that's a shame that we're teaching everything that we're being asked to teach in a 40-hour session. It's like a week of training, and I've got to give them everything that you all know that you teach. It's too much, and so in a lot of ways, we have to teach this course as an overview, as a summary, and somehow I've got to get this content down to these students in a quick and a colorful way. Looking at the setting that I have, I want you to understand that the way that I teach this course is much like Phil Donahue would host a TV talk show. I walk around with a mic and I ask questions, or I yell really loud, or I'll just sneak up behind a student and make them stand up, introduce themselves, and answer the topic. I have to keep this thing moving so that they don't fall asleep, or that somebody doesn't miss a point. It's almost like performance art. It is not like, it is performance art. And I have to be able to be nimble, knowledgeable, and entertaining all at the same time, because 2 hours, even 2 hours is, as you all know, is a long time for their attention span, especially when you're trying to teach something like contracts. I'm going to get into that and kind of show you how we do some of that. I'm going to give you a couple of the tips that we do, and I'm going to certainly give acknowledgement to my fellow professor Kent McDonald, who has developed much of this course. We've adapted it over time, but it's certainly been a co-effort. One of the things that we start off with each term is a knowledge survey on the very first day. This knowledge survey is not graded. There's just 3 answers. I know very little, I know a little bit, or I know a lot. And there's approximately 50 questions that we ask. And if you can't read it, something like, you know the difference between an RFQ and an RFP. Most of the students will come in and they'll say, yeah, I might have heard of it. Nobody is answering that they're knowledgeable about it. What the students don't realize is that this knowledge survey really becomes part of the basis for the course. And it's our intent that everything that is on this list gets taught. So this becomes our checklist. And then the better part of this is on the very last day, or next to the last day, we give the same survey and we ask the students the same questions. And certainly our hope is that they've moved from I know very little to at least I know a little bit. And this is one of our ways of assessing, did we cover all the things that we thought that we were going to cover? And we just use it for internal use, but at the end, we're usually finding the students are scoring substantially higher. They're saying, yeah, boy, I do know the difference between an RFP and an RFQ at this point. So I think it's a helpful tip. You might look into it. Our graduates are highly successful in getting jobs right out of school. And one of the things that I've shared with you that I only have them for 40 hours a week, but I spend a good chunk of that time, approximately 3 class periods, let's call it 6 hours, helping them move into the job market, or to be accepted, to be picked by some of these firms. One of the ways that we do that is we have career services from the university come over and spend an hour and a half with the students, just helping them understand what employers are looking for from a career services standpoint. How to modify your email address so that it's appropriate, how to take a good LinkedIn photo, what employers are looking for, salary ranges, where to find that kind of information, how to network. And we spend a little bit of time with those experts in the field from career services and talk about networking. And then as they work on their resume, one of the next class periods we do, I ask local practitioners to come in and set up an interview station. I ask all of the students to arrive at school that day. So again, we're back to 110 students. I ask them all to come in like they're going to a job interview. They have multiple copies of their resume. They've come dressed for success. They, pre-COVID, they would shake hands with the interviewer, and each of these they would go through a 10-minute, 15-minute interview process with the understanding that it was a safe place, that they could make mistakes. And at each table here, we have the interviewer and their colleague peer is the note taker. After 15 minutes, they switch. We kick them back out the door and another group comes in. What I've found is students have said just this experience of going through a real architectural interview has been very helpful for them. And it's one of the more fun days that they get to do this experiment. Even though it only takes a little bit of time in the class, they really enjoy this part. The very next class session is the day of our career fair day. And what I do for this particular day, we have our classes scheduled so that was happened on career fair day. I asked some of the HR representatives and prior graduate, now employees of these career firms to come and give a panel discussion within our classroom setting with the understanding that students can ask them anything as HR reps in a safe place, again, trying to get to see what it's like on the other side of the interview table. And the HR representatives are talking about what they're looking for. They can't advertise their own firms at that moment. They are just generic HR people, but it really gives the student an opportunity to ask those pointed questions like, how do I ask for more money? Or how do I ask for time off after I've signed the contract for employment? So those kinds of questions come up in that safe setting. Then that night is the career fair. And now they've got actually a shoe-in to some of these firms that they might have met at our panel. So we found this to be extremely helpful for our students to spend this little bit of time getting them ready for the job market. I mentioned performance art before, and I'm just going to go very quickly. Some of the things that I do to make the course entertaining is I use a lot of graphics. I use a lot of hand gestures. I try to make this as fun and interesting as I can. And again, it becomes a performance art. It almost becomes Instagram-ish or meme kind of ranked drawings. I mean, these are intended to be fun so that I can capture their attention and keep them going. We do teach ethics in the using the kind of the code of ethics. We talk about ethics, but each student has to write their own personal code of ethics. We ask them to write down what they stand for. And then for a lot of the ethics questions, we give them scenarios, something like this, and I won't read it, but we put together a handful of ethical conundrums, let's call them. And we ask the students within groups to answer as come to consensus within the group as to how they might resolve this ethical conundrum. And oftentimes what happens is between groups within the classroom setting, it might even break down into an argument between two, each taking a different ethical side. And it becomes a very robust discussion about ethics. And I think that's very, very healthy. One of the hardest things that we all have to teach is contract relations, what happens within the contract, and without just reading the contract, memorizing the contract. And the way that we've done this, and again, credit to Professor Kent McDonald. Kent has a writing style that we've adapted and we've used for many years now, where we create almost an operatic, over-the-top play with this cast of characters: Bob Wortman, Herb and Marge, and Buzz. And there's a whole opera that goes with the discussion, where there's usually some type of introduction that I might read aloud over the class, as if I'm reading from the play. I mean, it gets into, if you read the bottom line, poached salmon with a bear blanc sauce. I mean, this is completely over the top. And then there's usually some case where something happened. We need a soils report. The client tells the architect, get it yourself. And at that point, the student groups need to go through the contract documents and try to find who's right, who's wrong. Is there a way that this might have been communicated better? Could we educate our clients a little bit different? And over the course of 20, 30 scenarios like this, the students have a pretty good understanding of what's in the contracts and how they might resolve some of these issues that we've over dramatized to get to this point. Again, the students find this, and then they all have to do a write-up of this, of each piece. And I found that it to be a quick way to get them deep into the contract with some understanding of what it is. And of course, they have to stand up and discuss it. When it comes to assessment, we do it probably much like many of you do with pop quizzes and midterms and exams. We also, when it comes to exams, I still prefer kind of short answer questions, a lot of multiple choice, but certainly a lot of short answer questions. And I have found that whenever I give the student an option with a multiple choice, the quality of assessment, I think, goes down, because I can't really be sure if they understood or if they guessed properly. But whenever I use a short answer format, it takes substantially longer to grade. I can really understand if the student has understood the material. And then lastly, each group is asked to put together a ProPrac portfolio, we call it, which is they've created their own firm. And this one is called Catalyst. Their team members, their business cards, they've established their legal structure, their individual ethics standards and cost estimates. All the pieces, all the homeworks that they've done throughout each of the sessions is now formatted and combined into this one roughly 40-50 page document that each member then gets to use as they're going into a job interview, that they take this with them. We feel that it's just about as important as their design portfolio. And it's been, again, very successful in helping them get that first job. So that's kind of how we do it at Cal Poly. And I want to thank the Scholars Program for helping me always push this thing a little bit forward. It gets better every year because of the things that I've learned in the Scholars Program. And I certainly thank you for your time, and I'll pass it off to David.
Right, I'm gonna, as we switch slide decks, I'll interject. We had David pinch hitting for us. John Boelkins is also with us today, but 2 days ago, we weren't sure if he would be able to be with us. So David stepped in and is going to share now. And then John, I'm gonna come back to you to ask some of our more discussion questions. Since we won't have a chance to have a presentation from you, I'm gonna start with you in our discussion period. But David, take it away. After you unmute yourself, you can take it away. Still not unmuted. Mike, maybe you can unmute him for us. There you go. Now we can hear you, but we don't see your presentation. Karen's been asking several questions. Greg, you might care to answer some of her chat questions. But one of the advantages when we actually have the Scholars Program is all those kinds of questions come up, and we have time over those 3-hour dinners to talk about them in more length, which unfortunately we won't have today. But David, looks like you're ready. Take it away.
I am. Thank you, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everyone. I confess that I'm a little bit intimidated by the presentations of my colleagues. They're so scholarly and so pedagogical, and I just I would like to start out by saying I have made some wonderful connections and collegial relationships by being an NCARB scholar, and you just heard a couple of reasons why with the presentations from Catherine and Greg. My approach is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to focus so much on scholarship and pedagogy, but on something that maybe most of us do, and some of us may even struggle with, like I do, and that is, what do you leave your students with at the end of a semester or a quarter? A few years ago, a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon by the name of Randy Pausch wrote a book called The Last Lecture. And he had just been diagnosed with liver cancer. So it really, really was a last lecture for him. And if you want to get a perspective of what is really important in the teacher and student relationship, read that book. It's fascinating. But it set me to thinking about what would I say if this was my last chance to impart any kind of wisdom or knowledge or understanding to my students. I don't teach a studio, so I only know them for 16 weeks. And as I tell them, just about the time I'm getting to know them and even like them, they're gone. And so I approach the last class with that kind of a viewpoint. A little bit about me before I launch into that. I practiced architecture for 35 years in and around Texas. 20 of those years I was in business with my father, who was also an architect. More about that in a moment. I have been teaching at the University of Texas at Arlington for about 8 years now. UTA, as we call it, is a major university in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It has 42,000 students. It's the second largest campus in the University of Texas system. It's in the heart of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which just happens to be the fourth largest metropolitan statistical area in the country with about 6.5 million people. So my students have a lot of options when it comes to finding work. They don't always find it, and it doesn't always mean that the economy is great, but there's a lot of diversity and a lot of energy in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. UTA has traditionally been a commuter school. It's not so much anymore, but that's its history. Within University of Texas at Arlington is this college that we call CAPA, the College of Architecture, Planning, and Public Affairs. There's about 1,100 students in that college, comprised of the schools of architecture, which includes landscape architecture and interior design. Several years ago, our architecture school merged with the schools of public affairs and planning, and thus that gave us the College of Architecture, Planning, and Public Affairs, thankfully reduced to an acronym we can say, CAPA, and we don't have to say College of Architecture, Planning, and Public Affairs 100 times a day. The School of Architecture itself is about 665 students. There's only 8 architecture schools in Texas, and there's only one in North Texas, and that's UTA. Our program consists of a bachelor degree, which is a 4-year pre-professional degree, and a master's degree, which is another 2 years of the professional degree. So we have really a 6-year equivalent program. So what is a last lecture? I think if you want to consider this, think about what's going through the student's mind. Graduation, excitement, and trepidation. Even my students who have office experience are, in many cases, very apprehensive about what awaits them in the professional world. Add to that we've had a Corona spring, and I believe my students were even more apprehensive, and you probably found the same thing in all your classes. Can we give them hope? They ask me sometimes, is there hope? And it's a challenge to sometimes tell them, even at my advanced age, I have to tell them that nothing has ever happened like this before, but you can certainly count on trials and tribulations in this profession. Why do we do what we do? And this is what I'm graduating into. Sometimes that's their attitude, and I say, yeah, you are. What's it all about? Is this course about contracts and risk and all the horror stories that come with telling them about getting sued? I don't know why, but they ask me, tell us more about getting sued. And I say, well, I'm only going to do so much of that. I'm not going to overemphasize it. Is it construction management at risk? Is it RFIs and ASIs and RFPs and change orders? Is it about profit and loss? Well, those things are all important, I'm sure. And I know you all think they are too. But what I try to emphasize in my last lecture is that this course is about what it means, what it really means. Really means to be an architect, to become one. I want to give them something that's bedrock solid, something that they can remember when they go through the inevitable swings and peaks and valleys of a career. And so what do? I look to my own past and I look to my own mentors. One of the things I ask them early in the semester is about their favorite architect, and they have to make a presentation. And inevitably, I get asked the same question, who's your favorite architect? And I always refuse to answer early in the semester. I tell them, I'm going to tell you my favorite architect at the end of this course. And so at this last lecture, that's where I reveal that I have not one, but three favorite architects. And it's the basis of knowing them that has taught me what it means to be an architect. The first one, no surprise if you know me, Bob Messersmith, my father, was the first architect I ever knew. And I didn't want to be an architect when I was a youngster, but as a rebellious teenager, I had a confrontation one evening with my dad, and I came away with this. He said, why don't you think about leaving something behind that lasts longer than you do? And it was in that moment that epiphany occurred to me, that I realized what my father did for a living. It would take me several more years to decide that I wanted to do it too, but at least that was the seed that was planted that night. Much later in my career, I knew a man named Robert H. Lamond, an architect in Fort Worth. He was a mentor, he was a guide, he was another father figure in my life. And the man spoke in paragraphs. He didn't mince words, and he was known for being both eloquent and loquacious. But I asked him one time what the meaning of architecture was, and he answered me with three words: conceive, believe, achieve. And here I was expecting a dissertation, and I got three words. They stuck with me for a long, long time. Later, another architect whom I had the very great honor to know and to work with and to become friends with, the famous genius Mexican architect, Ricardo Legarreta. I won't go into details about how I know him, except to say that I found him to be one of the most humble and unassuming yet intellectual people I've ever met. I remember something that he wrote in one of his books, speaking about architecture. He said, the road is not long, but endless. And when we disappear, if our ideas are worthy, someone will pick up our flag and continue. So my last lecture ends with a challenge to my students. Whose flag will you pick up? Will it be someone that you work for now? Will it be someone that you'll work for in the future? Will it be a professor from this school of architecture? Will it be someone like the philosopher, architect Legarreta? There's no way to know, obviously. They're just starting their career, but the important thing is not whose flag they pick up, but that they do pick one up, that they do the picking up, that they conceive, believe, and achieve, and that they leave something behind that lasts longer than they do. And so after 16 weeks of contracts and the ever popular standard of care, which I harp on every day, it seems like, in class. What I think it really means to be an architect is what I just told you from the three mentors in my career. Yes, old white men, all three, but still no less qualified to give me perspective. And although they're all gone, I speak to them quite regularly, almost every day. And then one thing that I think is important to stress to students is that once they have completed our course, they're really not our students anymore. They're our colleagues. And I make that point as I close my course and bid them a successful career and a happy and, of course, healthy life. That's the way I end my last lecture. And there you have it.
Thank you, David. I remember you talking about that, I think at Scholars, and I think at that time we talked about the that you shook their hand as they either entered or exited the classroom that day. Yes. Which is such a powerful message, which we will all have to be rethinking about that shaking of hands. But I thought that was a really great physical manifestation of your intent there. I'd like to ask John to yes, Mina. I think bowing would be great. I'd like to ask John Boelkins now to weigh in and share any thoughts you have, and I'll just leave that wide open. Any thoughts you have on the scholars or on what your colleagues have shared so far, or what you took away from the event? Any of those topics would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone. Good to see all of you from, or some of you from last year anyway. It was such a good event to get a diverse group of approaches, really. I think that was incredibly helpful to me. I ended up teaching pro practice kind of by accident. Maybe a lot of us do. It's a course that's notoriously difficult to teach. I think maybe it has a worse reputation than it should. And I think that what all of the people that are involved here try to do is actually point out how important it is and how interesting it can be. So I think that for me, it's helped to round out some areas where I felt weakness in or insecurity in how I taught the course. We had an abrupt departure of a faculty member, and so it came to me as I was one of the younger faculty, but with some of the most experience in practice. I was in practice for 10 years before gradually shifting into teaching more, and that's really the foundation of how I teach, not only in studio but in in pro practice and in the other courses that I teach, is I really try to bring a practice-based model without it being a sort of strictly functional model to it. And so I've had the advantage of being exposed to so many of these other really tremendous, teachers in order to help inform a course that I was kind of left on my own to define.
Yeah. All right, I'll ask our panelists just one quick question, and then we'll go toward Harry will sort of facilitate our broader discussion. For our panelists, anything else that you want to say as you've reflected over the last year? Sort of, what did you take away from the experience? How did it change? How did it change your teaching?
I'll start. Again, Greg from Cal Poly, and you know, I think one of the things it's changed my teaching, certainly just by, as Jonathan has talked about, giving a little bit of confidence to say, you know, what you're doing is right. We're all teaching kind of the same thing. Here's different ways to do it, different tweaks to it, and that's been very helpful. But the part that I have found most helpful to me is recognizing that there are people out there that are doing what I'm doing at all of these other universities, and now I have this network that I can call upon. And I see some of you in the chat today or in the room today, and I know that at any moment I can call another school and say, wow, I'm really struggling with this effort. How do you do it? And that was something where I always felt isolated before. Now then, that's available to me. And I think it's been a huge help, and I really appreciate the Scholars Program for that.
Catherine, anything to add?
Yeah, so I would say that just the research that NCARB has done to give us perspective on, you know, practice across all of our schools has really given me insight and appreciate more what we have. And it's extraordinary that we do have this opportunity to have a 3-course sequence and to make the most out of it. And just one little tidbit, I know this is in the weeds, but when I was doing my slides to try to get the text down, I actually merged my learning objectives with the activities, and it seemed like I came out with better learning objectives. So even questioning how we do these things has been really valuable.
Great. David?
I second the notion that you establish really good and close relationships with colleagues who share the same kind of issues that you do, and I may be like some of those who are on the call today, in that my career was all focused on practice and not on the academy. And I appreciated the Scholars Program for giving me some really solid pedagogical theories about how to approach the transfer of knowledge, not just from an adult to a child, but from adult to adult, because our students really are adults. And I learned so much about the theory of knowledge exchange that really enhanced my my teaching, my methods, and frankly, my fulfillment from doing it, because I know a little bit more about the theory of what I'm doing.
John, any last word from you on that topic?
No, that's a really nice way to put it. I think Greg made a great point about the validation that, you know, I didn't have any exposure to any colleagues who had taught the course before. So my very good friend, Bob Kohler, taught at the University of Arkansas for a long time and passed away from cancer. And then his replacement left quickly. And so I had no kind of tutelage in this, and was very much on my own. We had no other current faculty who had ever taught the course for me to lean on. And I was a year, I suppose, into teaching full time. And so again, it's just the validation and things that came from spending time with these other great teachers was just incredibly helpful to me.
Harry?
Excellent. Well, I do hope that all of you have gained some knowledge here or given you some areas to think about. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time today, and we are running a bit behind. But I do still want to open it up for a couple of moments so we can talk a little bit together. We're not putting you in work groups or into individual Zoom rooms as we have in other occasions, and I'm sure you have too. We don't have time for that today, but we have some other things planned which you might be interested in. But right now, what I'd like to see if anybody would like to chime in about, what's really needed next in pro practice. And so we really have two questions we hope to spend a little bit of time here together on. So what do you really think is needed next? Well, you've heard these individuals talk about the way they bring their classes to somebody here on this call, have something really innovative you feel you're doing that you want to share, or you can even just blurt out what you think might be next. The other question that we have for you, if you would like to answer this instead of what else is needed, is what shouldn't be taught in your class that you're being made to teach? Is there something you think should be taught somewhere else? Which could be a more provocative discussion. It could be a topic for an entire hour-and-a-half session. Both of these topics could be, I'm not sure, but I'm going to ask, I'm assuming Mike can see if you raise your hand in the group. Mina has raised her hand. I cannot unmute people, so I believe you can unmute yourself, and I see Mina's hand up first. So Mina, if you would like to add something.
Okay, forgive my hair. Unlike most people, haven't had a haircut in a long time. I've been teaching professional practice with my colleague, Michael Risak, who just joined. And we've been very fortunate in the sense that our partnership has been really dynamic and engaging, and we bounce ideas off of each other all the time. So it's great that we actually have each other as resources now, because now we can bounce ideas off of all of, our entire group. I think that, I think most of us are in agreement that there's just not enough hours to teach what we need to teach. It's almost difficult when you say controversial to figure out what we should not be teaching, but there's so much not being covered in Design Studio that we feel like we have to take up a lot of the slack that might not be covered. And as the times are changing, we do have a tendency to adjust the way that we teach our classes. And what we've done is we've made a lot of the classes much more engaging by creating more of an interactive dialogue, which is more of a challenge on Zoom. But one of the things I've been doing is I've been reading a lot of, I've probably attended so many Zooms. I'm so zoomed out. But some of the things that are challenges are the problems I wrote in the chat about in real life. And architecture is something we create in real life. And the difficulty of, I'm writing a paper right now for the Center on Public Diplomacy, where I'm a faculty fellow, but I am a licensed architect too. So the problems that we have as a profession and the practice is that we're teaching how to construct and create these spaces that are supposed to be experienced in real life, because that is our job, to protect our bodies from the environment and to create spaces of inhabitation. So one of the things that we are finding that is going to be a real challenge is making sure that the students are getting enough information about the connectivity of our physical bodies to the making of the building, to the dynamic forces, for example, structure. They don't quite get it when you're looking at the simulacrum of an image in Zoom. And, I've read articles about the challenges of why it's so exhausting to do these Zoom sessions is primarily because our bodies for thousands of years have adjusted to absorbing information through corporeal presence. And we are now forced to navigate interaction where we're looking at our images and, there's like the fact that like all of us are on mute right now. That's not real, because the reality of our real lives is we have ambient sounds and we're used to it, and we're used to cluing in on these things. So I'm writing all of this right now in my article and stuff, but I find that's going to be a problem when we're trying to teach how to build a building, how to put it together and doesn't leak, and how to make sure that they get these connections.
Very true. Very true. Comments, thoughts, other individuals on the call? It is the one thing we have all learned through Zoom is we have to be a little bit more respectful of not talking over each other. It makes life very hard. It really does.
I'm lowering my hand.
I am looking up and down.
I was going to say, this is a challenge when we have our pro practice class. Like, so Michael and I have this big class of 157 students, 158, and a lot of them don't talk enough sometimes. So, we were talking about, David was talking about being like the Phil Donahue. We have to figure out ways to get them to engage, and it's more difficult on Zoom. So I think some things that we can think about doing, like we actually had Krista Becker come in to talk about public speaking, and she made them get up on the stage. How do you do that on Zoom? Do you do these, get them to do these exercises where they're breathing? And like, do we get them to get up and stretch? And like, that's something that I think we need to talk about, how to engage like with an object and like putting the details together. Do we do these demonstrations where we show leaking roofs and stuff like
It's going to be different. So I do have Nia. Nia, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, not my picture.
Yep, you got you.
Thank you. I was one of those, I guess, good or bad scholars who applied and the whole thing got canceled, the 2020 professional practice. But I had a suggestion, which I teach professional practice in Howard University. And it's just like other courses which I've heard, it's a 3-credit course for 1 semester. I tried something in the last fall semester, which I thought was something worthwhile sharing. So I teach in HBCU, and I wanted to see what will be their reaction to real situations. So I made them into teams, and I said, you need to enact. So we used Office. Most of you have seen Office show, right? So they had to pick a scene from one of their favorite Office show and make it into an architectural office and bring up some ethics or some scenario and how will they deal with it. So it's very interesting what they came up with. It's about, one of us was the Office shows with tags on each other about ethnicity and the other things. And I'm kind of like confused now. How am I going to do this in a virtual environment? Like Mina, she said, it's so much easier in a classroom setting. So we did a little documentary about this teaching professional practice through a series of enacting. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with this? How do you deal with ethnicity? How do you deal with colleagues in an office? So, and we tried to do a debate, and it was wonderful to see students actually come out of their shell and actually open up to each other and talk about real feelings. So teaching in Zoom, I think it's going to be a little more challenging, and I'm hoping to hear more if you guys change it into this. Any more tips other than Zoom and virtual scenarios or strategies to do certain professional practice? And the other thing I found challenging was cost. Unless I give them a cost data sheet, it is really hard, at least I found it challenging to teach cost. And I'm looking for other ideas on how to do it. And thank you for NCARB for putting this together.
Great. I think, the expectations of what might be the future and even the different types of things that are happening along the way and which you're having to look at for this fall and maybe even for next spring and maybe even into the future. I think we can certainly host a whole hour and a half on that topic. Patricia is going to talk to you about some of the things we have that we actually kicked off yesterday, and we will do more of these and host them in conjunction with ACSA, and we'll be doing some of them ourselves. So that would be very good. James Halliburton, you had a question you'd like to ask the group.
I do. Thank you, Harry. So I'm James Halliburton. I coordinate the Master of Architecture program at Texas A&M. I don't actually teach professional practice, but I'm a student of Dr. Miranda, who I think is also on this line. So I'll do my utmost to make him proud. So I have a couple of comments as far as talking about the Zoom interface. So I'm also a practitioner locally, and over the past 10, 12 weeks, I've had to walk school boards and large school facility committees through entire sets of plans via Zoom. So I had no preparation for that. It was quite the interesting experience. But I think the preparation that you get for something like that is the public speaking component, a clarity and or practicing actually a clarity in what you're trying to present. So anyway, that's not really my question, but that is more to say that it's a challenge everyone's facing, and kind of learning to grapple with it, whether or not it's ultimately required going forward is an essential kit in your or skill in your toolkit. My question is actually about what is and is not being taught in a pro practice. So what I stress in my design studio, a very short thing is showing students when according to your state requirements, when is an architect actually required in a project? What sets those, what dollar values, sizes, building types set those parameters? And that I lead into that discussion because with them, with the intention of letting them know what are design services, what are architecture services, what are professional design services in general, architect, engineer, and when are those required, and how they fit into that as licensed and unlicensed. And the reason I do that is because I think, and especially coming out of what we see in COVID, this notion of the rise of the gig economy. So we have a lot of students graduating and they want to go on to do design work of some kind. And several of them have contacted me after they graduate, and they say things like they have somehow found a client who wants them to design something for them. What are the legal ramifications of this if they don't have a license? So I think setting that kind of continuum, or explaining that continuum and showing how that field works in terms of what are design services, what are licensed design services, what does that entail, kind of just giving that, I don't know what the right word is for that, but showing them that so that they understand where they fit in that continuum, right? Because I think our our economy is moving toward, or could move toward this gig notion, and we could see a lot of our students needing to have a flexible income base, and you know, they come out of school very talented designers and very knowledgeable, and many of them are hampered by the notion that they think that they have to have a license to do anything. And while I encourage that 100%, I think it's fair and equitable to show them what that field looks like, because that's kind of knowing what we do and when design services are required and what they do, I think is very, very important. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, or maybe it's already being done and I missed it, but thank you, Harry.
Quite welcome there, James. Hope everything's good down your way. Thank you for that. Karen Kensick, your hand has been up. Can't hear you, Karen. You're still muted. There you go.
I don't have an answer for you, James. In fact, I also have a question for people out there. A big part of one of our pro practices, we're lucky that we have 2 of them, so many above average, I guess, according to your pie charts, is on documentation. And I'm thinking perhaps about using BIM 360 this year to make everything much more collaborative in a kind of direct, forceful way. And plus, with a lot of the things that are going online next year, it seems like it might be a good idea. Has anybody used BIM 360 with team assignments in their pro practice course?
I saw James's hand go up.
In my practice, but not in my courses.
Not in your course. You know what you're saying you have? I don't have all of you on the screen. I saw Mina's Mina, did you say yes?
Oh, no,
Okay,
no.
Roussel.
I haven't, no, I haven't used BIM 360. Karen usually deals with that. So to give you a little bit of background, at USC, we have all three of us in on this session, by the way.
Yes, you do.
Michael Resack, Karen Kensick, and myself. Michael Resack and I teach the 525 course, which is pre-design, legal, everything but the documentation part. We cover ethics, we cover leadership, contracts, public speaking, branding, marketing, the whole thing. Karen covers the 526 curriculum, which primarily focuses on the documentation, the detailing, and also with Michael. Michael teaches both, and I teach with Michael for 525, and Karen teaches with Michael, and there's another co-instructor that teaches as well. Karen, are you doing graduate? I can't remember, graduate or undergraduate?
And the graduate students this year.
Yeah, okay, you're doing graduate, and then is it Justin that does undergraduate?
Yannick.
Oh, Yannick's doing undergraduate. Okay, so Yannick's not here on this, but we have a tendency to collaborate with each other, so we bounce ideas and we get on really well. We all have different talents. I'm a big communicator, and Karen's amazing with facades and so, I mean, she taught me computers and like all of the modeling and all of the interactive aspects of it. Michael is good at everything. Yannick is good at everything. I mean, so we all learn from each other. So in some ways we have an advantage because we talk to each other a lot. But maybe there's something that we can talk to you about, you know, like in like out of the session, because like I've been sharing with Karen what I've done. Like I had to do a virtual office tour and a virtual site analysis for my design studio. And since I focus on in real life applications, I'm teaching structural engineers design. So I have to make sure they understand the force applications. And so how do you teach them something they can't get an intuitive sense of? So actually I talked to Kate Diamond, and she suggested I do site analysis with Google Earth. So I got the students to do some of that. But like some of your challenges that you brought up, you know, it's gonna be like we're tweaking it. I can't address everything. I'd love to share anything I know.
Okay, even those of you who aren't using BIM 360, I did a quick survey of our students, and most of them seem to not want group projects. How are you if you are, we are going to make them do group projects because that makes sense in the collaborative kind of environment that architects work in. How do you make that work in the pro practice course?
In the pro practice course, that's the harder thing because I did it in the studio for team. We did have a group project, but we broke them up into East Coast and West Coast, and they all learned how to do Rhino and Grasshopper, and they learned how to, on their own, they just did it. I gave them a lot of freedom to do it because, and I knew that they were gonna have real problems understanding some, like the foundational connections of their buildings really sucked this year. They didn't quite get the foundation connection, but I am teaching a sophomore engineering studio. This is their very first design studio. So I didn't expect them to get that part of it. But like, if you're talking about pro practice and detailing and documentation, you know, that's a challenge. I mean, it's almost like there's a little bit of a trade-off I'm noticing is that they're learning some of the stuff that they might not have time to do virtually. So some of their 360 models might be more complete, but they might not be as correct because they might not get some of the in real life applications that they might see when they're in the class.
Yeah. So Michael, I see you have your hand up. I do want to be cognizant, as I said, with everyone's time. We are actually 5 minutes over our hour and a half. I think there's probably lots of conversations that everybody still wants to have. We can go a little bit longer, but Michael, do you have something else you wanted to add before we close this out?
Just a few kind of 30,000 foot comments. The culture of architectural design is that pretty much 90% of the classes will say something to a student that you will learn that later. that's usually French for you'll learn it in pro practice, if at all. And so I think that culture should be questioned. And then just for all of us, any of us involved at the university level, you need to seek out on YouTube, Scott Galloway's interview on Anderson Cooper at CNN about higher education. His name's Scott Galloway. So Galloway, Anderson, CNN. Please look at it. Thank you.
Great. Very good. Well, we're going to try and wrap this up here. I want to move back for a moment again. Thank you all for all of your comments. I really appreciate this. I think there's just been some wonderful conversation today, and I think you've given us lots of ideas for more opportunities. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremy to talk about a couple of things, and also Patricia. They're going to take us out to the end. Again, I thank you all. I hope all of your families, your friends, your colleagues are all safe and well. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon at some point, as soon as we can again in person. But I am probably guessing that we'll see you on a Zoom call again sometime in the near future, we hope. So thank you from my standpoint. Jeremy, please take us on home with Patricia.
That was code for, I mean to say, Patricia, you're next.
Okay, good. Now, I'll make it quick. We just wanted to remind you of a few resources that INCARB has been developing to help you in your job. So one of them is the Professional Practice Online Community Group. It actually lives inside the Architect Licensing Advisors community, and it's a closed online group exclusive for individuals teaching professional practice, so for you. And if you're interested, I just added my email address to the chat room. I only need an email telling me that you're interested, and I can send you, I can get you started in the process of getting you in. You're going to be receiving an invitation to join the community, because that's where the group lives. Then you'll get access to the Professional Practice Online group. And by the way, in case you don't know, hopefully you do, the Licensing Advisors community is another good resource for those who are helping students and recent grads. So if that's part of your job, this community is going to be helpful, because in addition to getting access to the ProPrac community, you also get access to ongoing discussions about licensure. We have informational videos, PowerPoint slides are ready for you to teach, and even you're able to participate in online trainings, and hopefully we'll be back with in-person trainings as well. Another way that INCARB is supporting the professional practice educators is by hosting virtual roundtables. We started yesterday, it went great, and most people there, all of them, supported having another session soon, so we'll start working on that right away. And finally, don't forget, if you're interested in getting a scholarship to attend the 2021 Professional Practice Scholars, INCARB Scholars in Professional Practice Program, I should know the name, that is going to be happening end of July, beginning of August. Please pay attention in February for the announcements for the scholarships. And if you want or have the ability to pay your own way, you're welcome to join us. Registration is usually open in April. So that's kind of my very quick summary of all the resources we have.
Thank you, Patricia. And so again, I know she was breaking up just a little bit, but if you, she put her email in the chat window, and if you want more information on any of those things, you can get it by emailing Patricia. The one other thing I will mention, she talked about the roundtable. That format, you know, this is sort of half sales pitch, half discussion. So I hope you not only learned about the resources that we have available to you, but I also hope you took away some valuable ideas from your colleagues and from our presenters today. But in the roundtable sessions, that's really just we stay out of the way and let you all talk. So I hope you'll join in for the next one of those. And then the next thing that came up in the roundtable yesterday is remote supervision. There were a couple of questions people had about that. It's been something we've been getting questions about, and that refers to the way in which supervisors in the workplace supervise their licensure candidates while they are not in the same physical space. And we actually have a blog post about that has been written and is in sort of the polishing stage. I think that will be up next week. It's not up yet. But if you go to ncarb.org/blog sometime next week, I think you'll see that post, which may be helpful to you or to some of your colleagues or to some of your students. With that, I will close us out for the day and say thank you so much to ACSA for having us. Thank you to you all for joining us, especially those of you who have been with us on a couple of calls this week. It is my great honor and privilege to spend time with you. It makes my job a wonderful thing. It's part of my pay package to get to spend time with you. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you to our panelists, Catherine, Greg, David, and John, and to Harry and Patricia. And hopefully we will see you all soon and you will be back in the classroom even sooner.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed this. Coming from Mississippi. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Hey, Kevin, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Greg.
Today. Good to see you. Wendy, good to see you. I saw Eric, saw Michael, saw a whole bunch of people. It was really cool. So
it's awesome.
Thank you, NCARB and ACSA for putting this on. That was excellent. So,
yep, appreciate it. Be well, folks. Take care.
Thank you. See you
Bye, Wendy.
Greg, are you ready to host us next year? I'm really looking forward to it.
I am super ready. Super ready. But we just got our barbers open. So, I mean, we're going kind of slow here in California. Not like Texas where you can pretty much do anything you want. Seems
Well,
like.
you need a barber more than anybody I know.
I know. That's been good. So no, things are beginning to open up. San Luis Obispo City proper has actually been probably one of the safer places you can be. I think we've had one death, and we're in the 200 range of confirmed cases or something. It's been pretty low. So we've actually been pretty good shape. What we don't know is in the fall if we're certainly planning on teaching online again in the fall. But the university is giving us, at least there's discussions about certain colleges having exemptions to be able to teach face-to-face, and architecture is one of those deemed essential to teach face-to-face. So that'll be a whole nother set of discussions. How do you teach in a safe environment for faculty primarily when you've got a ton of kids moving in and out? So
that's an interesting conversation, like really interesting, like how to be safe if you're in person. It's going to be kind of whole topic, but for everything. Yeah,
it's going to be a very interesting discussion, because we have some faculty and certainly some students, but some faculty that are compromised or vulnerable and don't feel comfortable coming back. So we have to be able to teach both. Certainly interesting in our 5th year set, where I think we have 9 teachers that are all doing 5th year thesis capstone. I think we've kind of made a pact between us. If one of us doesn't teach if one of us chooses not to teach face-to-face, then all of us will teach online, just so that the student experience is the same and we don't start breaking up the cohort with those who want to have a face-to-face experience versus those who want a virtual experience. We want to try to maintain that semblance of unity within the cohort. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'm going to bug out because I've actually got students waiting in the waiting room on the other line. We're still in class here, but Harry and Patricia and Jeremy and everybody, thank you, and all of our team.
Thank you
So much. It's
Thank
really,
you, Greg.
really great.
Everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all. And Mike, thank you very much for hosting us.
Yeah, hi, Harry.
Thank you so much. See you all soon.
Good. All is good.